Hi everyone, this is Omer Hancer. I'm a principal with ZS and I lead the analytics, advanced data science, AI and machine learning applications within our customer-centric marketing practice area with a focus on orchestration, next best action, and field suggestions. Today I'll be sharing some practical stories and lessons learned on using AI to maximize customer engagement. For those of you who are watching us live, I encourage you to submit your questions as we go through and we'll address those at the end of our presentation. Pharma has many critical questions around implementing these AI-driven engagement solutions with healthcare providers as well as consumers and patients. Some of those questions involve the translation of omnichannel strategy to implementation. And how have others done it? What does good look like? How do we advance the level of sophistication? If we started doing healthcare provider-focused next best action, where do we go from here? What does that maturity curve look like? Is it really possible to leapfrog, or do we have to crawl, walk, then run? What are some of the challenges and pitfalls that we can learn from those who have implemented this? And how do we engage the organization behind this transformative capability building? The paradigm shift that we highlighted in prior years continues to gain momentum across multiple dimensions. And COVID-19 has been a critical driver of this as well. Over time, we moved from national campaigns to segment-based journeys and ultimately to personalized omnichannel journeys down to the individual customer level, catered towards the preferences of that specific customer and including the patients and consumers as well. We moved away from static journeys to dynamic omnichannel adaptive journeys. Every well laid out plan will fail at some point soon after it was laid out. So what happens when that customer doesn't engage with the channel that we thought they were going to engage in? What do we do now? How do we dynamically adapt to changing circumstances and contextual drivers around that customer? Pharma drove significant value from reactive and trigger-based actions that were pushed out towards the sales force in the past. Now we moved into the realm of thoroughly AI-based and predictive cross-functional recommendations that capture not only the field representatives, but medical science liaisons, thought leader liaisons, nurse educators, business reimbursement managers, and others, as well as the entire omnichannel ecosystem, all optimized simultaneously. And content optimization with composite assets or overarching content categories of efficacy, safety, tolerability, etc., is now turning into a hyper-personalization exercise, which brings together the modular components of the content to personalize that message, that content piece in a much deeper way for every individual customer. Pharma is actually well on its way to drive this hyper-personalized and adaptive journey. Over the years, many organizations have moved along this maturity curve and enabled these reactive trigger marketing, then some degree of integration with the sales and marketing, and ultimately many organizations started driving the omnichannel next best action. The next layer there is to enable this hyper-personalization as well as expansion of next best action towards other healthcare stakeholders, such as the patients or consumers. Capabilities like omnichannel next best action, a hyper-personalized next best action across stakeholders, drive a significant level of agility in today's world in the COVID era, and they're here to stay post-COVID-19 as well. As we move along this maturity curve, the channel and content coverage grows significantly, well beyond the initial focus on the field force, now including the home office, email, the Medscape, and Hippocrates and Doximities of the world. The predictive and prescriptive algorithm sophistication improves significantly as well, and the integration with upstream and downstream processes and systems. We expand from a physician-focused view towards a physician as well as consumer and patient-focused view, and ultimately accounts in hospitals and institutions as well. And the personalization gains a new meaning with hyper-personalization, which we'll explore more in depth in the upcoming pages. In order to support this level of transformation, content management space itself also has to go through a massive transformation. There are significant industry pressures in today's world. I highlighted the need for very dynamic content pieces that will allow us to craft those journeys that will resonate better with the physicians. In our day-to-day life as consumers, we do expect that level of personalization from Amazon, from Netflix, from Facebook, and so on. The physicians also expect that level of personalization, and so do consumers and patients. That variety, that richness of content is not easy to attain. Traditionally, it hasn't been for pharma, because today it takes about 50 to 80 days for a pharma organization to bring a new piece of content to life after MLR approvals. That speed has to improve. The reusability and standardization needs to become a critical focus for all the content pieces and the tagging across channels, across markets and geographies, in some cases across therapeutic classes and brands as well, such that we can tag the content down to its granular composite fragments and components, such that we can analyze at a much deeper level and craft the messages and the content pieces, dynamically assemble those in such a way that they resonate much better with our customers. Let me share a couple of practical stories in this realm. The first one is with a large pharma organization. The focus was to bring essentially the orchestration, the full-blown omnichannel next best action capability to life, which is live now with multiple brands for this organization. But it was a long journey to get there, and there were many learnings along the way. So the program focus areas were multifold, from digital analytics to a significant amount of effort on field integration and adoption, and content management, and of course the data and platforms, including Veeva, Veeva Vault, Salesforce Marketing Cloud, data warehouses, and many others. Everything was pieced together by a very strong transformation and change management initiative that not only focused on the field side of the equation, but also managing the dynamics with all of the third-party vendors who now had to adapt to this new way of operating under the new next best action umbrella, being able to dynamically respond to changes that are pushed out by an AI decision engine. In this case, we used our ZS Verso orchestration engine to push out those actions and suggestions dynamically towards downstream platforms. This particular organization took a couple of years to get to this point, but they were one of the early adopters. The beauty of it is that the late adopters, who were slightly falling behind the curve in terms of innovation, were able to bring this capability to life in just about 4 to 5 months and bring to a level that is comparable to what we're walking through over here. So it is indeed possible to leapfrog the industry. We don't have to necessarily crawl, walk, then run. The outcomes were very promising. The rep impact was very significant. The program doubled the utilization of IVAs through Veeva on AI-driven calls, and the next best action recommended calls were indeed 50% more effective than other organic calls. The digital impact had significant value across multiple dimensions. We were able to bring down the number of digital pushes, the emails that went out, to improve the customer experience by 20%. I want to share a quick statistic over here. Today, the top 20,000 pharma targeted physicians are receiving, on average, 2,700 touch points per year from pharma. That's every hour of every single day. In order to improve that customer experience, we do need to carefully craft those messages and reduce the number of touch points to a level where they're much more aligned and much more aligned with the preferences of the customer and timed properly, so they resonate with the customer who receives them. With this organization, we were able to reduce the pushes by 20%, yet we were able to increase the actual volume of engagement by 10%, which translates into about a 30% improvement in digital engagement rates. And this particular organization was able to double the digital engagement rates during the COVID era because they were able to dynamically adapt to the changing situations within days, just like several other organizations who had this orchestration capability within days after COVID-19 news, to dial up or down the respective digital channels, as well as adapting the field suggestions for the field force. And ultimately, a figure that most folks are after is the sales impact. We were able to drive 35 to 40% impactable lift with a specific mature brand. So where do we go from here? We need to elevate the sophistication quotient. The hyper-personalization is the next stage to drive this level of personalization at the individual customer level, not at the segment level, not nationally, but at the individual customer level. We're able to tease out the receptivity of customers to specific content fragments and components of that content. In this example, Dr. Weiss is much more likely to open emails with shorter subject lines, is interested in reading emails with scientific images and clicking on video links. Whereas Dr. Sharma appreciates interrogative subject lines, and reads emails with patient images and infographics included in them. So an AI-driven modular content tagging and recommendation engine is able to tease out the differential receptivity of these customers to specific content pieces and dynamically assemble those contents to create a completely personalized message that consists of a subject line and a hero image and message body, or fragment 1, fragment 2, etc. That looks for Dr. Weiss significantly different than for Dr. Sharma. So how does this come to life? Let me share another practical story. We need to first prove that we're able to predict the engagement of customers at the individual customer level with digital content with high accuracy, going down to the individual fragment level, and establish that the fragments aligned with customer preferences lead to significantly higher engagement. As it turns out, we're able to very accurately, in the order of 80 to 90% accuracy, predict open and click rates as a function of exposure to a combination of content fragments for a physician. And we're able to bring explainable AI models to drive insights on what truly drives that engagement from that customer. An example is shown on the right-hand side. We're able to drive click-through rate up by about 40% by aligning the combination of content pieces with the preferences, with the measured and predicted preferences of the individual customers. So I've shared the email example, but the same logic applies to interactive visual aids or interactive sales aids for virtual rep, which will become more and more important in the COVID and post-COVID era, banners and websites as well. So let's now turn our attention to our patients. Our industry is in the midst of an experience revolution that continues to put the emphasis on consumers and patients. Statistics show that around 7 to 15% of healthcare now is shoppable in the Amazon sense, and that number is growing. It has ways to go, but the impact of the consumers and therapy choice, and of course, staying on therapy, is significant. Pharma is aiming to provide a seamless and unified care experience to the patients. But that's not a trivial process, because most of the ecosystem is not fully integrated. For us to be able to fully understand the patients, we do need to have a 360 view of the patient and integrate that ecosystem so we can enable that continuous learning across all of the touch points that happen around that patient and the contextual dynamics that drive the patient in one direction versus another. And that continuous learning does need to drive personalized next best engagements through our patient services, as well as other touch points that pharma drives with with our patients to empower patients and caregivers to take action at the right time. So in essence, many of the approaches that were thought through for physicians do apply in the patient domain as well, with significantly different nuances around consent dynamics, the needs of the patient, and the outcomes that we solve for to drive a better experience and a better set of outcomes for the patient with appropriate compliance protocols being followed. So let me share a real example in this domain. The intent is to drive a proper omnichannel journey capability for the patient support program initiation and early engagements. We do need to harmonize all the touch points that are happening around a specific patient to drive that consumer promotion and also the support of that patient down the line. To craft a personalized experience for the patient, driving what we call a patient engagement index, which is a composite index that captures the breadth of engagement across the different channels that pharma has to engage the patient with. The depth of engagement, so if I download a pharma app, do I actually use the app? How frequently do I use the app? And finally, the consistency of the engagement. So over time, am I engaging consistently with the touch points that aim to drive perhaps an easier onboarding for my therapy, or a better continuation or refill over time. We were able to attain 90% model accuracy in our prediction of patient engagement. And by optimizing just a handful of channels, we're able to drive an 8% uptake in patient engagement index and a 10 to 20% increase in number of email opens. And that's enabled by changing a few things along the journey, optimizing the channel sequence, suggesting the appropriate content pieces along that channel journey, and suggesting the appropriate timing for those. you'll notice the parallels with what we were able to do with healthcare providers on the patient domain as well, but of course with the appropriate consent and compliance protocols in place. Pharma has been referencing event prediction, field suggestions, next best action, and orchestration capabilities quite extensively in the last several years. So how do these capabilities come to life in harmony to drive a better engagement and ultimately better outcomes? There are several significant questions that aim to address generally what we call the 4 C's: the right customer, the right channel and content combination, and the right cadence or the right timing. Well, when we double click on these 4 C's, there are further elements that shape up these 4 C's. So in order to get to the right customer, we need to identify where the upcoming opportunities are. Where is that next event going to happen, patient event or HCP event? Who's that next patient is going to be diagnosed soon? Who's that patient is going to move from stage 2 cancer to stage 3 cancer? Or is that patient who's going to move from second-line treatment to third-line treatment? And who's the physician who's likely to touch that patient or treat that patient at that point in time, so I can inform the appropriate channels, including the field force, of course, that they should be there, or we should be targeting that physician at the right time to drive the appropriate treatment initiation, if our treatment is the appropriate one for that patient at that time. There are several algorithms that are running in parallel. Some of them are patient event prediction algorithms, some of them are HCP event prediction algorithms, and some of them are actually reactive in nature too. So we do capture market dynamics that have actually already changed, and perhaps we need to respond to some competitive dynamic that's happening. So the why becomes critical, especially in driving the right degree of adoption with the field force. That's one of the most critical learnings along this next best action and dynamic targeting journey. That the why matters a lot in driving the appropriate adoption. We need to work hand in hand with the field force to drive that common understanding of AI and human intelligence, human brain. So we push out the right kinds of messages and the rationale at the right time that do resonate and drive actions. The most sophisticated actions that we push out, if they're not appreciated by the field force, they will create effectively zero impact. So we do need to make sure that what we push out actually blends into the day-to-day life of the rep, drives a good customer experience for them or user experience for them, and they understand the rationale behind it. Which content do we use in that interaction? What do we say if it's the human channel that's interacting with the physician at that point in time? And how should we engage them? Perhaps it's not necessarily the field representative or a thought leader liaison who's interacting with that customer at that point in time, but perhaps it's a non-personal promotion channel. So which content piece should be pushed out through that non-personal promotion channel? So we drive the intelligence behind this with our Verso suite of applications, and the downstream actions can be pushed out into Veeva or Verso applications as well. So let me quickly share a story on this as well. So this is for a mid-sized specialty organization that's heavily focused on bringing the power of AI and predictive analytics into the hands of the reps, and shifting the way they operate from a quarterly or semesterly planning exercise to a much more dynamic way of interacting with their customers and much more contextual way of interacting with the customers. Of course, there are algorithms and technology that lie behind the capability, but the most critical pieces are around the change management and the user experience that we create towards the path to success that's supported by our Verso suite of applications. We worked hand in hand with the field force to drive that degree of appreciation for the types of suggestions and the predictive nature of those dynamic targets that do resonate with the field force, that eventually led to a tangible business impact and appreciation by the field force. So a 33% lift in impactable sales, over 2,000 patients, potential new writers identified, many of whom who have already started writing as predicted, and 2/3 of the patients who actually did switch were predicted correctly as potential switchers well in advance for the reps to take action upon. The numbers are important, but just as important, perhaps more important than the numbers, is the feedback that we received from the field reps. This is leading me into places I would have never thought about. I don't know the magic behind it, but it's helped me uncover new opportunities. I've worked in pharma for 20 years and never seen something so cool. This is going to transform the way we work and make us so much more effective. With that, I'll stop. For those of you who are watching the live session, I will move into our live Q&A. And for those of you who are watching this on demand, thank you for your time.